Hey, welcome to this week's Technical Difficulties. I think we're on episode 9. And Jay, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, glad to have you back.
How's it going?
It is going well. Just, plugging away on some new projects over here. We got some new stuff coming up for the cafe website.
That's cool. Yeah, I'm kind of taking a break between projects, but I think I just finished what I call the widget, and
It looks good.
thanks. So one of the things that I like to talk about a little bit is sometimes where the name comes from, and I had a business teacher. I think it was high school, may have been economics or something like that, and he says, okay, let's say you sell 100 widgets, and I said, what's a widget do? It's like, well, anything you want it to be. It could be anything. And so one of the things that people always ask whenever I make anything like with a Raspberry Pi, they always ask, what does it do? And so
Yeah, I get that one a lot too.
So this one, it's actually intended for long running. The battery problem is something that I think we all kind of take different approaches to, and I think there's a whole bunch of different ways to kind of slice that up. But I wanted something that would run for a very long time, and the use case is, if somebody's going to use something for, let's say, wireless auditing, or for work, like actually for pen testing or something like that. You want something that's really functional, and you want something that's frankly as simple as possible. But I wanted something that you could throw in a bag and leave it there, and something. It's my first chance to make something that would actually run all sealed up. Now you've got thermal, throttling and things like that with the Pi. But I've got it here.
Have you actually had a thermal throttle on you yet? Because they'll run real hot before before you actually notice any reduction in CPU speed.
Yeah, I haven't. I haven't, frankly. I wanted something though that you could, if you wanted to basically leave it open, you could. So, I'm somebody. I've got it right here.
Yeah, let me pull you up to full screen.
And so here you're going to get some reflections here, but essentially what you have is, and I don't want to press them. One's a multi-function button. You can have it be anything you want it to be. One is essentially the power button for the battery control. It's got a small OLED screen in there. I'm sorry, actually it's not OLED, it's a TFT screen. And then basically just a Raspberry Pi. And on the bottom, if you look at it on the bottom, let me get it in here. You can see I've got a micro SD card in there, and I've got a single, what is that, 18650, I think that's what they are.
Yeah.
I can never remember that number. Battery. And it'll run under load, they're saying 3-4 hours just on that one battery. But I wanted something that could run for a really long time, and I wanted something that was going to be fairly rugged. And I chose something that kind of isn't really for makers, but it's something that you could definitely do, and that is basically they're designed for like military radios, but it's basically a battery. This one has a bunch of I think they're 123 lithium batteries in it. They have rechargeable ones for these. The rechargeable ones are outrageously expensive, like $300-400.
So this is a disposable battery pack.
This one is, yeah, but you can get rechargeable ones. And essentially, it goes on here and locks into place. And then once you do this, the unit starts actually running, it starts actually charging the 18650 battery off of the external battery.
So you've made a hot swappable battery system. That's excellent.
Yep. So the real challenge is you could actually put like this battery pack outputs, I think, like 11.5 volts. So you could you could have this be a cigarette lighter or something like that. But the idea, though, is that this thing is highly portable. Um, and I think,
For the professional cameras, they make a similar battery system, and they are significantly cheaper. Now, of
yeah,
course, they're not going to be as durable if you drop it or something, but still pretty good. So that could be an alternative if you didn't want to drop, say 300 on a rechargeable. You'll pay 300 for for a whole battery system, the charger, and a couple units
yeah,
for those camera rigs.
that's a really good idea because I know, yeah, and I think like Adafruit even sells like the battery dock as well. So
I've
that would,
seen a few adapters for them. People use them to power other stuff all the time.
yeah,
And they even make some with USB output as well, so you already have a 5 volt.
yeah. So this one I did. So that the other thing I think I haven't really talked about because I decided on this one not to do like a write up on it because it's really just a Raspberry Pi in a box. It's a very simple, very straightforward. It's not supposed to be sci-fi. It's a tool. But the one thing I'm pretty proud of on these is I decided actually not to use threaded inserts for the top and the bottom because they don't actually come off that often.
Mm-hmm.
But what I did was I came up with a way. Take it off screen here. These are thumb screws. There's M5 threaded thumb screws. But what I did was, let me see if I can get this on camera. I made, and it's started to come out a little bit. I could do a better job on that. But basically, this is a silicone bead. And I think I talked in the Discord server. It's got some funny name for McMaster Car. It took me longer to find the name for the product than it did to actually design and print this part. Because this part's, it's small. It's really quite shallow and actually pretty darn rigid. And all it does is have this bead. The silicone bead is basically an 1/8 inch around, and you can stretch it out to make it thinner. You can kind of push it together, make it a little bit fatter. But the idea is that it mates directly on here, and so this bottom plate is just thick enough, and it rests up against there. So it basically goes into these threaded inserts, and you can see this is probably the cover that would get opened a little less often. So it's got the USB-C and micro USB here for the UPS board, and then it's got the display ports down below for the Raspberry Pi. So if you needed to connect it to a display, you just take the port off. You just take that cover off. And on this side, I have a couple of the threaded inserts just as a place to put that extra, this panel.
Oh, nice. Just somewhere to store it.
Yeah, somewhere to store it. So that way, because I wanted to do, and I started doing some research on making or designing, nylon caps. And there are a ton of like individual USB port, where you can buy a bag of like 50 nylon inserts that cover up, Ethernet or RJ45 or USB.
Yeah, I have a few of those around.
But actually something that would be like a larger cover, because what I wanted was I was willing to change the shape of the product to match some kind of a silicone cap, and I just didn't find anything. I found there's a cool Hackaday article while I was looking, which was a guy that like used 3D printed molds and then it basically used a caulk gun with silicone and injected it in and made his own low volume caps that he used. So he actually made his own, and that looked pretty neat, but wasn't going to be a good fit, I think, for this one. But from a build perspective, it's pretty straightforward. It's one piece, 3D printed, that's just the walls, and then a top and a bottom. You could, if you wanted to, get away, like if you were going to sell these or buy I may at some point sell just the top and bottom pieces. But this was one that, I kind of wanted to go in a different direction, wanted to say, You know what? Like we see, there's a lot of 3D printed Raspberry Pi cases, and a lot of them are designed to go on a desk. And I have a lot of fun with Cyberdeck designs. I really love seeing the designs that we have from the
this
from
one
the
right
server.
here, great on a desk.
Yeah.
Probably the heaviest case I have, and it really has a lot of nice features. But for everything it's got, they could have just extended this a hair and put a battery system in it, and made it something you could take with you.
Yeah, there's and maybe some of this will be solved with the compute module stuff where people will get a little bit more creative. But there's some things that just with the Raspberry Pi that there's some design, I'll just call them flaws. They're not flaws if you just want a Raspberry Pi to sit on your desk. But a perfect example is your GPIO pins in the hat system is designed to stack on top. That was fine when you had a really slow, fairly cool running CPU and fairly cool running, memory. But
Right.
but the problem is like with that enclosure that you have, I think that has like a metal nub on it that basically goes down and touches the CPU. Which
Right,
makes
this
it
whole-
into a heat sink, right?
The whole thing's aluminum, and it actually has two kind of metal stacks that protrude down. It touches the CPU and something else, I think the RAM.
Yeah.
And then it has a fan, so it's actively cooled as well. And so that kind of solves a little bit of it. And then it moves the GPIO up to the top.
Yeah.
So, kind of takes care of a lot of those little annoyances. This really actually is the best case I've ever seen for one of these, even as a power switch. So it does a safe shutdown for it.
Yeah.
But that right there, I think, is the worst part about the Raspberry Pi is when you turn it off in software, it's still running, but it's running in a low power state, and you can't turn it back on while it's still in that low power state, so you have to completely kill the 5 volts coming in, turn it back on to get it to boot up.
Yeah.
Unlike, every other computer on the planet that actually turns off when you turn it off.
Yeah, like one of the things that if you look at some of my early designs, like if you look at the Raspberry Pi recovery kit, it was very early in my way of thinking three-dimensionally. So if you look at it and you take that display, and I should have had it out, I've got it sitting in the box over here, but if you take that and have the display sitting down, everything just stacks up next to each other or stacks on top of the Raspberry Pi and just kind of, it's all right there. It's kind of like, fitting, boxes into a moving truck. Everything's kind of fit in where it can fit in the real estate and the face inside the display. And then if you look at some of my later designs, I'm getting more creative about stacking stuff and layering stuff. And one of the things that I think would be super helpful with the Raspberry Pi in general, and I think the compute module boards, as people start to get creative on the compute module, is make stuff stick out the bottom. So perfect example, the thing that I think would be super helpful is to put the CPU on the bottom of the chip. Now I know like the Rock Pi and some others do that, and it creates this kind of weird scenario if somebody's just going to have it sit on a desk. But if you're going to run some kind of a hat or some kind of a board, you can stack it like that enclosure that you have. You could just put like header extensions and just stack it all the way up, probably all the way up to the ceiling,
Right.
and put as many hats as you wanted to on there.
For anyone that doesn't know, most boards have the CPU facing up, but you absolutely don't need to. Any cooling solution that is, dissipating that heat out somewhere, it doesn't matter if the CPU is facing up or if you place it on the bottom. You're not going to have excess heat coming up through the PCB, which is why pretty much every laptop nowadays has the CPU mounted to the bottom, because they can put the heat pipes and the fans and, so that's done by pretty much everybody. Yeah, I do have one of those Rock Pi boards, and the CPU on that thing actually gets pretty toasty, but having on the bottom makes it much easier to cool. You can just have the bottom plate of your case make contact with it through a thermal pad,
Yeah.
and then the entire surface area of your case becomes the heatsink, and it can be passively cooled that way if you have about a 4-inch square of aluminum flat sheet or larger. So it actually is pretty nice. And yeah, I see what you're saying with the CM4. You could easily make the carrier board just put the Pi on the bottom and then leave the top real estate open for anything you want.
Yeah. And that could be simply, perfect example of that. Somebody could make and maybe people will. I think it's just a matter of, if you look at how long it took people to spin up, cool cases for the Raspberry Pi. For the longest time, you wanted to cool when you had to 3D print one, right? Where it was like the generic one. And now there's like all kinds of, there's really cool metal ones like the one you have. There's cheap metal ones that are still fine. And I think it's going to happen with the compute module. But like a perfect example with the compute module, there's nothing to keep you from having through hole, like a circuit board with the through hole solder points for the headers, and to have it be, one side on basically two sets of those headers on each side of the board, and one's designed to face up, the other one's designed to face down. And that way you could put your compute module right up against, a metal case, and then you could have your headers and everything else internally. So I think that's, I've been critical of the Raspberry Pi design, and, it's kind of one of those things where, it was kind of designed for education, and I think we've all taken it, a lot further than it was ever intended for.
Definitely has gone further. The Compute Module 3, for instance, they built that with industrial applications in mind. It was meant to be dropped into someone else's carrier board with whatever specification they needed, because, they can't make a version that will suit everybody. So they just made the smallest one they possibly could, so you could put it in anything. And there were a lot of carrier boards for it, but for the CM4 now, at least I'm seeing more options now. There's a bunch of handhelds, which is great. It's perfect for that environment. Have a nice little screen, some controls, a battery. Probably not even that difficult to build and design.
Yeah, that's the thing. I've seen on Twitter a few different folks that have just getting started on PCB layout, and they're starting those. And then I think, I forget the name, obviously they're not, they don't sponsor me or anything, but there's a couple PCB manufacturers that will also do assembly. And so when you're talking about some of those super fine surface mount things, that starts to become, if you want to do something super crazy and super compact or whatever, that compute module I think is going to be the direction that people go.
Definitely is going to be fun to see what people come up with. I mean, I would love to design one for myself, something geared towards building a Cyberdeck. Ideally would be one that has every port imaginable broken out on pin header. USB is fine over pin header. HDMI, it's a little bit touchy on pin header, but that could go over PFC flat ribbon cable. We all use those flat ribbon cable HDMI cables that are built for like FPV flying. If you just had the ribbon connector on board, then you could route the actual port wherever you wanted it. And hopefully someday we'll have companies like Waveshare or UC Tronics start putting those PFC connectors right on the carrier board for the screen. That way you could avoid the whole HDMI plug.
Yeah, that's one thing on the Raspberry Pi Quick Kit and the Recovery Kit is those both use that 7-inch touchscreen, and even though that 7-inch touchscreen is tiny, boy, it kind of scratches an itch, because all you really need is 5 volts and that DSI cable to the Raspberry Pi, and that is just so easy. It's just it solves so many different kind of problems. The thing though that I think Adafruit, let me see if I can maybe you can put it into the chat. Let me see if I can find it. But I think Adafruit started.
For anyone watching, this is the ribbon cable, and that is a HDMI plug. They're detachable, so you can put any kind you want, micro, mini, the input or output. And if you just had these connectors built into the Raspberry Pi and the screens, it would also be a lot easier to fit, because those getting those HDMI adapters is a hassle. And if it's a right angle or a left angle or an up or down, it is a lot easier to deal with these ribbon cables.
Yeah, let me see if I can find the tweet. But Adafruit just recently shared, or somebody, I don't think it was Adafruit. I think it was somebody working with them. They're working on I think they're going to call it a Cyberdeck, and it's basically a thin display with a CM4 carrier board built on the back.
So, well, they actually already released what they're calling a Cyberdeck, which is a pin extender for the Pi 400, and that just makes it easier to connect a small display or some of their, I think their feather wings or something like that. But yeah, the one you're talking about, that is a sort of a spirited successor to the Pocket Chip, which was a pretty neat little project, but maybe poorly managed Kickstarter. The company behind it failed immediately after shipping out the first batch. But that's a common problem with kind of a one-off project.
Yeah, so I found it. It's by Diodes Delight on Twitter. That's the ones they're making that. So to me, that's the stuff that's really cool, is to see all these different form factors. And I think that's, for people that say, what does this do? The cool thing is a Raspberry Pi is essentially just a small computer. And so what typically, limits the use of a computer is, let's say you go out and get a really fancy brand new laptop. Well, now let's say you spent a couple $1,000s on a nice gaming laptop. You're not gonna go to Starbucks and leave that on a table while you go to the bathroom. Now you got to go lug that thing around, right? So, versus, you got your phone, and a lot of phones cost hundreds of dollars. And what do? Oh, you just put it in your pocket. Yeah. You're not going to leave that on a table. You put it in your pocket. You've got a desktop computer. You might have a great desktop computer, but you're not going to take that. I know there's all those pictures of guys with iMacs at a Panera or something, but there's not, if you have a desktop, it limits what you can do with the desktop. And so to me, the thing that's super cool about just the Cyberdeck in general is experimenting with form factors. And there is no right form factor. It is, to me, the wilder, the crazier, the better. I've been looking at Pelican cases that I've made for almost 2 years, right? And I'm a little bored of Pelican cases, I got to tell you. And so the thing I love is I see people doing split keyboard stuff. I think that was the Make Modify guy that did the one that in those German cases.
Yeah, that one's excellent.
PCB. Yeah, that was super rad. I love seeing that. So just
that question of what does it do? When someone asks that, one of the things I think is they actually don't know what it could do, because nowadays most people just turn on any device, open a web browser, and then connect out to all of their social media and browse Pinterest and do a bunch of boring things. Frankly, they don't actually use a computer to do what it's good at, which is computing. Mm-hmm. And that term actually has a meaning to it. It's meant for computational tasks, processing data, doing things that are interesting. We all used to run the folding at home for discovering new information about proteins and the way they interact. And that project wrapped up because it completed. They actually, they finished folding all of those proteins in that virtual environment, and now they just have to process all that data, and eventually that'll make its way into the medical field and probably lead to a few cures to something. And millions upon millions upon millions of us contributed to that platform. Yep. And that was an interesting thing to do. You did that usually with your desktop. You just leave it running at night when you weren't using it, dial up to the internet, and connect to the thing back before we even had high speed. Nobody does anything very interesting with a laptop or desktop anymore, besides like, digital media creation, recording things, artwork. I mean, that they are interesting things, but when you have a Raspberry Pi in your hand, it's a physical object that you can manipulate, that you can plug a switch into and make that switch do something. Automate a task, make yourself some automated blinds or whatever, whatever thing you think you might want or need. And, it's actually fun. It's actually an interesting thing.
Yeah, I think there's two things. So one, it's something that the author slash activist Cory Doctorow has talked about a bit, and he's called it, and I don't remember if he coined the term or if somebody else did, but the idea is called the war on general purpose computing, and it's this idea that computers have to have this specific. Each computer is built to a specific task, and they become more like appliances, and that the electronics world is increasingly hostile to a computer that can do a variety of tasks and do them well. And the challenge is, because if you have a computer that's going to do a variety of tasks well, you have to have full control over that computer. And I think that's the rub, is that I think there's still a lot of interest involved in limiting what people can do with computers. But the other thing, that I've thought about too is, people say, well, isn't this a laptop? What's the difference between this and a laptop? And one, I said, well, this is fun to make. Like, one, and then I'd say two, you can work and upgrade it yourself. Like, I could literally take the old Raspberry Pi recovery kit out of the box and repair it. It's got a cracked screen. It would take me 15 minutes to replace the screen. It's got a hard piece of hardware that's too close to the screen, and if you put it in wrong, it's what cracks the screen. It would take me 12 hours to print a new face to take that part off. Like, all of those things. And imagine if you got a laptop and if you closed the lid on it the wrong way and it broke the screen, it's garbage. It's worthless. It's unusable.
Right. Well, the exception to that being a good Lenovo ThinkPad. I actually did the LCD replacement on mine about a month ago, and it was a total of 4 minutes to remove the bezel and swap the screen. And that wasn't just because it was broken. It wasn't. That was a IPS upgrade. It went from like a 1333 to a 1080 display. And that's one of the few platforms that I really feel like they actually care about their end user. And in a business environment, if you're out in the field, you can't have computers that break and can't be repaired. A lot of people too, when they're asking about building a Cyberdeck and asking for advice, and they tell me that they have an old ThinkPad and they want to like take it apart and use the parts in a Cyberdeck, and I'm like, hold up, you have a Cyberdeck. Just do every upgrade that exists for it, and you'll be so happy with what you have. Plus, you'll have, kind of built something of your own. Make it custom to what you want. I really wish there were like 1,000 more companies like that doing, the same thing, not gluing everything together.
Yeah. Can you imagine if ThinkPad, if Lenovo shipped a ThinkPad with, they're doing thinner machines that have memory soldered on and storage soldered on and some things like that. But if you look, there are still the machines where where it's still super user serviceable. They tend to be a little bit thicker, like the one I have here is a little bit thicker, but frankly, you don't notice.
And they're not heavy. People think because it's thick, they're heavy. They weigh the same as any other laptop. They just are slightly thicker because all the components have a little bit of a gap between them, which makes it user serviceable. If you glue everything down flat, then it's just, it's a piece of throwaway junk. It's like the way, they make Apple computers. They're very hard to service because all the parts are integrated so tightly. They're good machines, but, it's not going to last you.
Serviceability is terrible. Yeah, the one thing I would say though is imagine if Lenovo had a ThinkPad and they put GPIO ports on it. Like
Well,
imagine,
there are GPIO ports. The problem is the extraction layer. We were talking about, uh, you know, not having access to a general purpose computer. Everything being purpose built. Every laptop has GPIO. It's just hidden behind your BIOS, and your operating system can't really do anything with it directly.
yeah. And so what I mean is actually like a plug either, on like perfect example where I would love to see GPIO is on the back, the actual back of the machine with some threaded standoffs where you could add your own stuff onto the lid or on the back or a bay on the bottom, that those kinds of things. Like I'm not saying like it's not there. What I'm saying is leave it there for people to do things with.
Right.
And
Yeah, that'd be
and
fun. With the ThinkPads, I've done a lot of mods on them too. One of my first big hardware projects, I got one of their docking stations, which was kind of like it kind of looked like another ThinkPad, and it just clipped on underneath your existing one. So it just made it much thicker. Um, and so I took that and a USB hub, stuck a bunch of hard drives inside of it, stuck a external battery in it. uh, you know, Made the thing twice as heavy and twice as thick, but it also gave me close to a terabyte of storage and, about a 20-hour runtime before that was a common thing you could have.
yeah,
And, that was kind of fun. And it was not that far off from what the stock hardware was built for. It was just a little bit of a modification to it. And
yeah,
they used to have a lot more modularity too. You could pop out your CD drive and swap in another hard drive or another battery in the same
battery.
bay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was nice. You could have 3 batteries in your ThinkPad and never plug it in.
I remember handling one of those. Somebody had one. It wasn't mine. I remember handling it, and I was like, "Oh my God, this thing is heavy." It got great battery life for the day, but it was heavy. The one that I went looking for a little while back was the super compact one that they had, where when you opened the screen, the keyboard kind of, opened up, kind of pivoted out like
Yeah,
that.
the butterfly keyboard. I actually did have one of those when I was a kid. It was a non-working unit though. It was just like someone gave it to me. It was their broken laptop. I was
Yeah,
very, very little, and they gave it to me just to play with. Um, I must have opened and closed that mechanism 500 times before I got bored of it.
yeah,
Uh, it was actually pretty interesting.
yeah,
And now, I mean, well, the option now is they just make a smaller keyboard because you can just adapt and type on a smaller keyboard.
yeah.
But at least it was interesting. It would be fun to see more modular computers. I know there's one laptop made right now that takes a Raspberry Pi. And it is pretty neat looking. It's a kit. You can get it off Amazon, 300-400 bucks. But the place where a trackpad should be, you pop that off, and underneath of it is actually the GPIO and a bunch of other connection points and some RGB LEDs. And that's really cool. It gives you that spot where you can connect things. But you can't leave anything connected when you close the lid. And it's not actually a trackpad, so it has no mouse input.
Oh wow.
So, it's a little bit not the best design, but it's close. It's a neat try at it. They just got to try a little harder next time.
Yeah, I there's a lot of laptops through the ages that and being somebody that as a kid, I saw mainframe terminals. I was around mainframe terminals when I was a kid, so I saw the big luggables and stuff like that.
Speaking of a mainframe terminal, this is a mainframe terminal keyboard.
There you go. There you go. Like, but I have to tell you, a lot of the stuff is still kind of sentimental. The stuff, the clunkiness. It would be cool to make something super thin, but I don't actually want something super thin. Like, I've thought about like redoing the Raspberry Pi recovery kit and stripping out some of the I/O and just filling it with batteries. I like looked for a long time. One of the ideas, and maybe there's something out there, but one of the ideas I had was just to do that 7-inch display, a Raspberry Pi, and then nothing but a huge 18650 battery bank, in that, what is it? I think it's the 1350 or 1400 Pelican case. So I like the clunkiness, but I also I think Apple made the I don't remember what their terminology was, but it was they made like a 10-inch laptop. And I think it was not Intel. I think it was a G4 laptop, but it was a tiny thing. And I think it was like 10 inches, and a tiny thing. It's really cool form factor. They were slow as dirt, but they were like this is the same time like the T650 or something like that from Lenovo was out. And so the Lenovo was a little bit bigger. Those Lenovos were tanks that, I think it was like Power Mac or something. I don't remember the terminology, so confusing for me on those, but it looked cool. And so that's the thing is, you see it and it looks really cool in a magazine. And then you find out it's the cost of like 2 nice ThinkPads. And you're like, And I'll have to admit, I, for a long time was like, ThinkPad, like, the IBM logo on it's too big. I don't like it, because I'm always not a logo person. If you notice, like, most of my stuff, I don't plaster my logo over stuff. But I didn't like, even the ThinkPads because of the giant IBM on the front. And even like mine now, I think it said ThinkPad and it's got a paper sticker and an Adabot sticker. So like,
well, Apple sure likes to put their logo on it. They stick it right in the middle, make it light up, make it as big as you can.
Yeah.
They want you to know.
But I wasn't a fan of ThinkPads, and then we had one when I was on call for a job way back in, I think 2003 or something, and they had the on-call person had to have this data card and a Lenovo ThinkPad, and that thing just, now you only got like an hour and a half maybe or something like that of runtime out of it. Battery didn't last long.
Yeah, my first laptop was a ThinkPad. I think that's why I've always liked them so much. My brother gave me his old one when he upgraded, and that thing was pretty tiny. It was like a 9 or 10-inch screen, and it was a Pentium 2 processor, maybe like 166 megahertz, 4 megabytes of RAM or something ridiculous. It was basically useless, but it was still fun to play with,
Yeah, but the keyboards have been consistently great, and I think you probably, look at any manufacturer for keyboards, and you'll say, every few years they have a really great one. You'll probably count on one hand the times that a Lenovo keyboard, and out of everything they've ever made, back when it was the IBM, but basically the ThinkPad. I'm not talking like the yoga stuff, but like the ThinkPad stuff, they're just consistently great keyboards.
Yeah, I mean, they're nice to type on. They don't sacrifice any keys. It's like a full 88 or 100 keys on there.
Yeah, I read a review. I think they have a new ThinkPad out, and they switched. I think it was the new X1 Carbon or something like that, and they swapped the function and the control button down in the corner. And I'm like, why?
They did the same thing to me on the. I've got an X250, which that thing's like 11 years old now, but I just gave it a 1080p screen, and that thing actually has 2 batteries, one inside and one external, so you can hot swap, kind of like the widget you've made. But they do the same thing. Function and control are swapped, but the BIOS, you open it and you can change it. They let you modify it, so you can swap them back.
I think the review said that you could do that too. I just wondered why.
It's because they are backwards. They should be the other way around. The control should be under the shift, but they typically have it over one, and the function is under the shift. So if you're used to a normal keyboard, you end up hitting the function when you meant to hit control. So I actually do prefer to have it swapped, so that control is under the shift.
Yeah.
But it's just preference. I guess if you've been using a ThinkPad keyboard for the last 20 years, you'd be really annoyed to have them swap it on you. But for everyone else who switches back and forth from a typical layout on a mechanical keyboard, but it just goes back to show, like, at least there's one company that actually cares about the customer and builds a fairly modular computer. You can remove the battery. Imagine if every single Apple computer had a replaceable battery. How much longer you could keep that machine running before you just were like, I think I'll just upgrade and spend, $2,000 instead of spending $200 to replace the battery, because you have to take it to a shop. If it was a $40 replacement like most computers, you would just keep that thing and keep it running longer. And obviously that design is on purpose.
Yeah, it's definitely intentional, and I think some of it is when they control the repair, they control that facet of the supply chain and the end user experience.
Well, yeah, there's no third party, repair services anymore. They've completely cut that out.
But I think some of it is also that they're trying to make everything thinner and thinner and thinner, and I think I think they reached a point of diminishing returns there. Like, even looking at the reviews of they have an i9 MacBook Pro, and then I think they were at Intel's mercy on that one, but you couldn't actually run the i9 under full load because it would thermally throttle, and the fans couldn't actually cool it off. So I had when my kids were little, we had a Core 2 MacBook Pro, a 13-inch MacBook Pro, and that one had replaceable SSD, replaceable memory, and you could open it up and the battery was just right there. And I think that laptop stayed in service as a kid's laptop for probably 6 or 7 years. And the last thing we replaced was the battery. But it went through multiple SSDs, because SSDs and hard drives back in the beginning were just terribly slow, and they got better and better and better. And that was just an easy way for the longest time to spring new life into a computer, was to add put the fastest
drive you could possibly get in there, and a new battery, and you could actually keep things going for a while. I had an iBook G4 that I use as just a music player, with iTunes. iTunes is actually pretty nice software, or at least it used to be. And, it's actually kind of nice. Just kept that thing running, set it on the speaker, on the stereo, and used it like you would any dedicated media center computer. Couldn't really do anything else with it. Had like the original format for Wi-Fi, so you couldn't even connect to a modern network.
Yeah. But that's, kind of bringing it back to Cyberdecks too. That's, part of what I try to do with my designs is they don't end up always seeing the light of day, but I end up playing around with the design and seeing what I can add and what I can modify and what I can tweak and things like that to make it, and without throwing out all the parts. To me, the ultimate upgrade at one point is if there was ever a reason, like the Raspberry Pi Quick Kit, which is turning out to be more popular. It doesn't get as many views as the Recovery Kit, because I think the Recovery Kit has better kind of eye candy value. But the Quick Kit, like, a lot of people have been making those. And at some point, it'd be really cool if there was a redesign for me to say, look, here's the new design. You don't have to buy any new parts. Here's just the new 3D design. And by the way, it adds, I would love to ditch the USB-A ports and go all USB, USB 4, right, at some point.
Sure.
And so you keep all the same parts, or you upgrade them, or you kind of do whatever.
You'll be able to do that for the CM4. They're making carrier boards that look identical, more or less identical to a Raspberry Pi 4. So in the same form factor, same format, you'll be able to drop in a CM4, which is significantly faster than just the Pi 4 and uses a lot less power too, so you're better on the cooling. So you could put an 8 GB RAM model in there, overclock it, still have better cooling, and upgrade it. I mean, I'll do the same for my deck projects. A lot of times too, I'll get a new Raspberry Pi and I won't even really use it. Like, I'll skip the whole generation of it. I use the Pi 2 a lot, and I got the Pi 3 and I use that. Then the Pi 3 Plus, I honestly never used it in anything. When I was about to use it for my Cyberdeck, the Pi 4 came out like a week after I had finished the project, and I was like, oh, okay. So, took the thing out, popped the new one in. But that's kind of the cool part, is you can just keep upgrading, keep on repairing, keep replacing these boards, and keep everything else. Nothing else changed. I didn't have to really, make any other adjustments, just swap out the board. There is a little more power requirement going from the Pi 3 to the Pi 4, but going up to the CM4, the power requirement drops quite a bit, so you'll actually be able to reuse your power supplies you had for the Pi 3B Plus. They'll have enough output to run the CM4, even though they struggled on the Pi 4.
What is it documented, or do you know why that power requirement has dropped so much for the CM4?
I think they used a smaller nanometer process for the FET chips inside of it. Just like Intel and AMD going to a smaller process, I'm pretty sure that's what they did. They just went to the next size down, something along those lines. So it's, very, very similar to the Pi 4 silicone, just improved and redesigned. It is quite a bit of lower power withdrawal too. Even when you overclock it and run it at max, it still comes in a couple hundred milliamp lower than the Pi 4 running at like 50%.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Which is, I don't have the CM4 yet, but I've got the Pi 400 motherboard here, and that has the same silicone on it. And I really bought this so that I could play with this thing before getting a chance to use the CM4. It's the same chipset.
Screen on that?
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to see that. Is that your own enclosure? Are you starting to build an enclosure for it?
It is. There's just a top plate that goes on it. I leave it off so I can show it on camera. And all the ports on one side, which is rather nice. It's actually a pretty good layout. It's as compact as you could possibly stick, everything that's on here. And it was very easy to design a case for it, because all I had to do was measure out all my ports. And, I did that, and then I have a model of the flat plate for here. And then I can take that and use that to stamp out the ports for anything in any kind of shape case very quickly. And this one's just pretty simple. I like to put my brand on everything. This just has some holes in the side, so you could screw it to the side of a project. Stick it, zip tie it to something. Whatever you wanted to do with it. You don't need a fan. You do need a heatsink on it. I just don't have one on here at the moment, but I've got a box of stick-on heatsinks around here. You would need the fan if you overclock it, but just the heatsink's fine otherwise.
And I think I've seen people mapping out the keyboard ribbon too, right?
Yeah, that's already been done. I don't know if you'll be able to see it on camera, but on the back side, there are test points here. These are solder joints that you can solder to very easily. They're good size.
That's cool.
And so that is what goes to this ribbon connector on this side. Obviously they left them on here on purpose so that people could play with that. The controller chip for the keyboard is a one-time flash chip. You cannot reprogram it if you wanted to connect a different kind of keyboard. But what you can do is just make a mechanical keyboard that follows the exact same layout and is compatible with the firmware already on that chip. So you can just replace the keyboard that it comes with a mechanical one. I think it's 88 keys though, so it's a pretty good size thing to build. Someone already did it, actually. They built it as a ortholinear layout and were able to fit the keyboard on top of the stock Raspberry Pi case. They just removed the keyboard, 3D printed a new one, and fit it right on top. It's pretty neat.
Yeah, I kind of get focused on projects, and I kind of go off in my own direction, and then I kind of catch up. And I've seen some stuff around the 400, and it's certainly pretty cool. Maybe it's time to pick one up and play around with it. But
yeah, I've got one that I've been working on for a while, and I mean to finish it, but I'm also not that interested in the 400, the stock case. I think it's a very strange shape. It has no flat edges on it anywhere, so it makes it very hard to actually work with the case to attach it to anything.
Yeah.
And I'm much more interested in just using the motherboard. Even if I have the CM4, the 400 motherboard is kind of better because you have the USB built in. I don't need the carrier board, and it's very, very thin. When you have the CM4 on top of a carrier board, it gets quite a bit thicker, and the stock carrier board, for instance, has PCIe on it, which is awesome, but that means you got to add a PCIe USB 3 card, and that takes up as much space as the whole motherboard. So having the Pi 400 motherboard is actually, probably the most compact option without building your own custom carrier.
Yeah, and if you go and look at, back7.co, you're going to see there's occasional military green, but a lot of black, a lot of white, a lot of gray. In fact, you can see my office is a lot of the same kind of stuff. I guess I'm not very on brand today for wearing a blue shirt, but the thing though that I do like a certain visual piece, and I see that purple, and I think, yeah, I know it's a Raspberry Pi thing, and I immediately want to even just paint it with a cheap can of rattle can black paint. It just makes me want to paint it.
I'll tell you why I do that. It is very hard to film and photograph black cases, so I tend to print anything that I want to show people in a brighter color so that they can actually see it. Hey, look, it shows, you can see it. If this was black on my black shirt, then it just disappears. And I'm not the best at product photography, so I tend to go for a nice bright case, something that'll really get you the clicks.
Yeah, I did a black quick kit. I made one black one out of carbon fiber, and that was an ordeal. I mean, it wasn't hard to print, but photographing black. I ended up I couldn't photograph it with the white background like I normally do on photos.
Mm-hmm.
I had to do a black background, and that's kind of like you stub your toe and you're like, I can't, my toe hurts, and then you stub your other toe, and then you're like, at least I'm not thinking about the first one anymore. I just kind of got to a point where I was like, and then I started playing around with like directional lighting and stuff like that, and it was really hard. So I still make black things, but if you'll notice, a lot of stuff I prototype is still in white, or in some random color that I happen to have. But the black stuff, I is kind of the special color for me. But the stuff that almost all of my projects are all in that gray, and that gray I just like
it. Looks good. I'm sure everyone watching is familiar with your stuff, but the photography you do for the stuff you build is really top notch. It really sells it. It really makes it look like a real thing. That it's not just a weekend project, but what it really is, something that took you probably 3-4 months to build.
And we also, I have parts that are functional that I throw away because there's a crack in it, or there's or part of it like adhered to the bed and it pulled some of it off, or so I think we talked, last time, I think it was the larger, one of the larger streams you had, where we ended up going off and talking about 3D printers. I've got them all dialed in, and part of it is because I'm a perfectionist with how those things come out, because I know, like, I've had projects that have ugly sides to them, and it makes it really hard to show something when oh, I can't show the bottom, or I can't show the left side, or whatever. And
I've got a few of those.
And I mean, that happens to me too. And so sometimes it's like,
or you gotta print it twice so that you can have the seam hidden on the back, and then you print it the other way so the seam's hidden on the other side.
So I did the mill plastic one, the green one. That one was a fun one to make, and it was like 8 million pieces, by the way.
Now, was that the one that you couldn't source the green plastic you needed to finish it?
Yeah, that was, they ran out during when everybody started printing medical stuff. They were like, oh, maybe they donated it all, but I had to stop that project, and then I eventually got some. But the reason I don't know that I've told this story before. The reason I ran out was because I got it done. And the way it works is it's all a bunch of pieces stacked up, and then there's threaded rod that goes through to hold them all together. And and the first time I started to make it, I made the holes just a little bit too small. And so if you can imagine, when you're drilling in like something like this, and you're drilling in a little bolt like this into plastic, you want a little bit of resistance, right? Mm-hmm. The challenge is that resistance adds up when it's a foot long. And it became more than what basically happened was I snapped off the threaded rod in the stuff. And I panicked, but luckily I just put my the chuck, the power drill, I put the chuck on the threaded rod and then backed it out. And I was like, oh, thank goodness, I'm still going to be able to do it. And then a couple of those pieces, I had a little bit of filament left. And so a few of those pieces, I made the hole bigger. So I took it apart and I made the hole bigger so that they would go through. And then I overshot, and it went into the end cap piece and bulged out the plastic. And because it was green, you stress it and it turned white.
Got the discoloration.
So I was like, I guess I'm going to wait till I can get another roll of that. It's not like I, make a parade of all the mistakes, but those, the stuff that goes into this, some of these projects do take months, I think I hit it on Twitter to talk about this a little bit. It's just supply chain stuff. I try to, if I'm going to make a project that I want other people to build, I try really hard to make sure it can be sourced somewhere where it's easy to get. So, Adafruit doesn't sponsor me. They've been incredibly supportive of my projects in the past, but they're not a sponsor. But their stuff, like, they'll tell you if it's discontinued, but if it's out of stock, you can, put in an email notifier and, they'll let you know. Amazon's usually pretty good. There are places that I try to source my stuff so that somebody can go and recreate that thing. And it gets really tough when you have something that's like at the center of a design and then it gets discontinued and it basically disappears. And I ran into that with the plastic, I guess that was probably 6 months ago with the green plastic.
Yeah, I had the same thing happen with a 40% keyboard I bought and built a project around it. I thought that keyboard was in supply, there'd be thousands upon thousands of them, no problem. No, it sold out a couple days after I bought it, and I hadn't even noticed. And now it pops up like twice a year, and it sells out in a couple days. So I just I never released that project because it fit a keyboard that you can't get, and there's no a convenient replacement for it. So that just became a personal project, and not one to share with the group. I mean, people have seen it, but I've never released the files for it because
Yeah.
it just wouldn't be useful to anybody without that exact model keyboard. Uh, and that's what I based the whole thing off of. Is a very cheap 40% mechanical keyboard, like $40, and those things are usually upwards of 90 or more. So that was kind of the whole point, was so people could build one of these for very inexpensive.
Yeah,
But
and
it happens,
Yeah, I mean, the Raspberry Pi recovery kit has a pretty nice plaid keyboard on there, and that PCB, if you buy the kit, I think the kit's like north of $100, if you can even find it anymore. And they stopped. I could only buy so many, and so for a few of those builds that I did for commissions, I had to order the PCB. Luckily, they share
Right.
the PCB. But those are big PCBs, and those PCBs are at cost to me like $70 a piece, like just because they're so big. And people would ask, when people used to ask, hey, will you sell me one of these? And then I would go and say, here's what it is plus a little bit for my time. And they're like, why is it so expensive? And I'm like, well, between the key switches and the keycaps, because they wanted the specific keycaps, that keycap kit was like $85 by itself. So I mean, it's got a $200 or $300 keyboard on it, and and it looks cool, and that's what I was going for. But it's one of those things where people would like, that's cool, I want one, and then I would basically I felt like a jerk because I'm like, oh well, no, you can't. They don't make them anymore.
Hey, that's just part of the mechanical keyboard game,
It is.
If you don't buy it when you see it, you're not going to be able to buy it again later.
Yeah. So what I've kind of I'm taking a different approach for some of the projects this year, where I'm kind of doing stuff a little bit more for me and do it. It's not that I'm not ever going to release designs again, but I'm trying to do things that are, what can I do? Like, try to be as creative as I can with stuff, without it being something that I have to necessarily always worry about, So, but sometimes it's like, I've got it around here somewhere, a mechanical keyboard kit that I ordered, and I'm still waiting on the keycaps. They're coming from China. Still waiting for those, and who knows when they'll be here. But when I make that, it's going to be hey, this is a one-off, and I'm going to tell people this is a one-off thing. It's here's all the stuff that I used, but don't count on being able to find all these parts. And if somebody wants to, I mean, it's the internet, so you can go scavenger hunting and find stuff. Or, the thing I like the best about the quick kit that I shared last year is I see people take it, and then I see people modify it. You see people, well, I didn't have a 3D printer, so I took your design and I cut it out of a piece of wood. Awesome. I see people that, oh, I didn't like the way you did the connectors, or I used a different screen, or, oh, I added a keyboard, or that. To me, those people are in, right? That's their first deck, but then they're going to go and make something. Oh, this time I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that, or I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. So there is an element, the commercial element, where, it's like, trying to find ways to, support the, the parts, because the parts R&D stuff, it's exhausting, and it gets expensive fast when you're R&Ding stuff. As hobbies go, I mean, it probably makes photography look like a cheap hobby, but part of it too is trying to balance out, is this something that I think other people will make, versus you just one. So I'm starting to play around with ideas now, and I don't know if it'll be this year, but I want to have something that I feel is, the recovery kit. I did the one way back. I think it was 2014 for me, and I called it the Raspberry Pi Field Unit, or the RPFU, because people were taking I had a solar tracker, and people were taking my solar tracker design and basically commercializing it, selling stuff. I was sharing source code online, and people were turning it into commercial products. So I was kind of mad, and I made a controller unit, and and stuffed everything into a Pelican case, and the wiring on it's atrocious, and you never see those photos. And I thought for months, I was like, I think I could make a cooler one now. I think I've gotten better. I've gotten better now. And so that's what the recovery kit was supposed to be. And so now I'm starting to grow past that one too. But every time I try to like say, oh, I'm gonna make something, and I look at it, and right now it's just not that much better than the stuff I made. People, you look at it and you'd be like, yeah, it's another one. I'm trying to make, so I'm trying to challenge myself there, and
Show us the widget again for anyone that's just jumping on.
Sure, it's right here. So here's the widget by itself. It's got a PRC, I think 185 or something connector. It's got a panel there for the power, so you can charge off USB-C. And then it's got another panel, and this is something I'll talk about in a second.
And we shouldn't downplay the importance of having clear panels on your projects. It just looks so much better. It's so cool being able to see what's in it. I think we all remember, seeing electronics when we were kids. They used to prototype them all in clear cases, and they'd always put those photos in the magazines. And then it would end up being like bright yellow or something hideous. And we all wanted the clear case.
Yeah. Oh, like that. I have to tell you, it's probably has far too much of an impression on me. Was if you people that are probably considerably younger than I am, go and look at the Conair clear plastic telephone. I remember seeing that. It's like, that's cool. You can see the electronics on the inside. And one of the things about this one is it's meant to be as simple as possible. It's meant to be easy to work on, easy to repair. And I wanted to make it so that the top and the bottom could be just the same panel, so that you had one part for the plastic frame, and then one identical part for the top and the bottom. And unfortunately, what that meant was the buttons, instead of being on one side, there'd be one button on each. And these buttons press a little easy. So one of them will turn on, and so there's nothing more frustrating than accidentally turning on a piece of electronic and then killing your battery, and then you go to use it. So, but this in here, the one thing I haven't talked about a lot is it's got a 6-fab USB. I'm sorry, not USB. Raspberry Pi power hat. It takes an 18650 battery. I have on good authority they're working on a new release, and what's cool is it's nearly the same dimensions as the old one.
Nice.
So they were kind enough to share with me, because I emailed them and it was like, hey, you don't appear to have a lot of these in stock. Are you going to keep making these? And they were like, yeah, we got a new one coming out. And then somebody from their engineering team was actually, said, I said, hey, is it physically any bigger? And they were like, oh, it's 2 millimeters bigger on this side, or 3 millimeters, whatever. So all I did on this case was make that area right there just a little bit bigger to account for the new one. So when they ship that new board, I don't have to change any of this design, hopefully.
That'll be cool.
But this is the thing I like about this though too, is this is a, this would survive. This would do well at, a tour camp for the kind of the hacker camps. This would do well at, DEF CON or something like that, or those kinds of places where, it, might get a little rough and tumble. This sure,
especially having your USB ports behind a panel. That's always good when you're out at those events. Don't leave exposed USB ports on things.
Yeah, and I'm going to play with it in a little while, but I also have, I think it'll show up here. I think I have to open it here. Hold on. I just got one of these in the mail today from Adafruit, and it's got, let me see if I can get that on camera.
The USB flashlight.
It's the USB. Those are 4 addressable RGB LEDs and a microcontroller on a USB.
I saw those. I was very tempted to order one, but I couldn't justify a whole order for one $4 part.
Yeah, I, I'm, yeah. So you do, I do, and you just rationalize. You buy multiples, and you're like, see, it's
Well, if I'm going to pay
$20.
$12 for shipping, then I'm going to buy at least $40 worth of stuff,
Yeah, yeah. I,
which is why I have a box about yay big that is full of unused Adafruit circuit boards. Lots of RGB to play with too.
I have a bunch of stuff. I think I talked. I think I was talking to MSG on one of the streams.
That's actually a good segue. He has just joined us, and let me bring him into the stream.
Sweet.
Hey,
Hey,
Hey, man.
cool. The widget looks very good.
Oh, thank you, man. Thank you.
Yeah. Anyway, you can continue what you're saying.
Well, I was saying, I started. I was working on like a LoRa communicator and was kind of sucking at the software, and then I see you came out with the one that
Yeah.
I'm like, that's it. That's what I was gonna make. Yeah.
There they are.
and it is an excellent little build too. I actually wanted to ask you, MSG, have you ever just ran full Pi operating system on there? Just use it like a little portable Raspberry Pi computer?
Actually, okay, I'll have to go to my basket, so give me 30 seconds.
I'm gonna pretend like I don't have a basket for parts and projects that are like just off camera for me as well.
I moved mine earlier, kept
All
tripping
right.
on it.
I just moved to a new place. I bought a bunch of boxes from the link that you sent me earlier. They'll arrive next week. In the meantime, in one of the IKEA furniture has this huge wire basket, and I have everything in Ziplocs there now, but it's pretty hard to find stuff. But yeah, every time I show or people sees it, they're like, what about in a Raspberry Pi? And does LoRa work on Raspberry Pi? And the answer is yes, it does. It works actually very well and very easy. And any of those, that is a hat. You plug it and you get the LoRa working. It comes with a little screen. It's kind of useless and 3 buttons. Basically, that's from the Adafruit. You can see the demos that you click and it says send and receive. You wouldn't be able to read text here. You wouldn't be able to type with just 3 buttons. So at the end of the day, you still end up needing full you need some keyboard and some proper screen to make it work. And I got it to work by putting the 4.3-inch wave share that I have around there. But the HDMI cable, the 4.3-inch screen, a keyboard, which I assembled a pocket type for it, you end up with a pretty bulky thing. And then you also need way more batteries than this little one. This little one works with a feather wing. The good thing is the guy that makes it is already kind of start releasing putting a Pi 2040 on the back. And I believe the Pi 2040 on the back allows you to do all the GPIO stuff. So you wouldn't be running here full Linux. It's one of those
Got your hands on one?
on
Nice.
2040 feather.
It's the 2040, the Raspberry, the 2040 Feather.
So I think that may work pretty well here.
I
Better
have
than
the older one here.
trying to put a 0 in there, because I don't think that's really going to work very well. But the 2040 here should work, and the guy is already developing. Again, it's just the problem you were describing. These combos of a screen keyboard out of stock. There may or may not be a version 2 coming this summer. And without having this screen keyboard combo, it just becomes a much bulkier handheld if you use other off-the-shelf parts, because basically you'll end up having to wire the screen with the wired keyboard, wire everything, and it just gets bigger.
Yeah, it's always hard when supplies are limited,
Yeah. So I pulled out some older projects. So I have this one I still absolutely adore.
Nice.
This
That right there, that's the first one of yours that I saw.
Yeah, and It's a great fidget device too because of this power tool trigger.
Yeah.
So it's great. This was the first thing that I made with a resin printer as well. However, it's always going to be in here because the threads for this have started to give way. So it basically can't really be taken apart ever again without it not going back together. So it's a desk toy now. But
I'm looking to potentially getting a resin printer. I was asking today Bud about. So I heard you cannot put the heat inserts there, and he's like, yeah, you just tap the resin. But I guess over time you run into this problem.
The resin doesn't hold up to the pressure fitting like FDM printers do. There may be heat inserts for resin. I really don't know.
No, you can't heat the. It is a thermal set resin, but once it's set, it can't be melted again. It only burns.
Okay.
So you have to use a thread-in insert if you want, or you just tap and thread it, which holds very well.
The other thing too that you could do, like it's in the Prusa printers, they use it a lot. It's like a captive square nut, where you have a slot on the side for a small square nut, and then that's
a lot easier on resin too because it's so precise. You don't have to worry about the nut not fitting because of a little over extrusion or something.
But this is a project that I think all I did was I never wrote up an article on it, and I think all I did was an early Instagram photo. But again, staying on brand with Pelican stuff. This is old too. This is a couple years old, and this is a Pelican 1060 case, and inside is that Pimeroni hacker hat, and then a 12-volt battery board, and then a Pi Zero, and then a screen. And all I did was make. Let me see if I can take it out here. All it is just a mount with a couple purple plastic parts, and it sits into the case. And it was neat, and it was fun to make, and not at all functional. Because the battery, it took I had a big battery bank that went here, and if you look at the Raspberry Pi recovery kit, the battery that's in the photos, I took from this project. So I'm totally guilty of making something and then robbing parts from the old project to make a new one. And then that battery, I was like, oh, I'll just buy more. And they discontinued that battery. So that's why when people are like, hey, what battery did you use? I'm like, use your own. It's not available anymore.
So MSG, who's hiding behind you? There's a head popping up in
my dog. Daisy, let me go get the dog.
I think it's your wife, actually. Doesn't want to be on camera. We got Blasto joining us here now too. Let me bring you in.
Hello.
Hey, Blasto.
Hey, welcome.
I'll offer you one Caleb to join.
I think they're sold out.
Speaking of sold out, did you guys see the Makers on Tap everyday carry tool that they just launched on Etsy?
Saw how much it costs.
Yep, $40.
That is a
I
nice
ordered
donation. Nice donation to make to them if you want to help support the channel.
Yeah, I ordered one because I do enjoy their podcast quite a bit.
I considered getting one myself, and I was like, well, I really don't need that tool, and it would just be one more thing I don't need sitting here. Cool looking though.
Yeah, apparently she needed to get something from the fridge. Needed a late night snack.
Oh, that's
she can be on camera too. She can just say hi.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to hide.
Right. She was hiding.
You'll
Not very
never
well.
see my girlfriend on here. You might see a disembodied arm reach into the camera frame.
Or
Yeah,
Jake.
Yes. Jake's not cute anymore though. She got a haircut. It's bad.
See,
Oh.
my dog is almost here. There. Oh, easy.
We were talking about the keyboards earlier, Jay, and I've got something here. Not gonna be able to see it too well because it's
I
very
know what
tiny.
those are.
A little bit clicky.
Yeah.
Nice
Yeah,
knob on it, and this is a XI-AO
What?
microcontroller. It's
Yeah.
got a USB-C port on it, so this is going to be a.
What?
Well, I can't give away all the details yet, but
Come on.
this
It's just us.
this along with 4 MX mechanical keyboard switches and a nice little case is going to be for sale on the cafe website very soon.
There you go.
One of the early prototype cases for it. Of course, can't see it because it's black and they don't photograph. But this is the general shape and size of it.
Very cool.
4 switches, so you'll be able to do things like map it for up and down, left, right, for arrow keys, or really anything you want. Along with this nice little black knob, which is going to be laser engraved with some one-off artwork on it. So each knob will have different artwork, and none of them will repeat. So every single one of them is going to be a unique piece.
I'll send you the back 7 logo. You got it.
I'll put that on one of them.
Yeah. I am I've got this Raspberry Pi or whatever, the 2040 Feather, like the confusing branding 2040. And I have found I'm still looking for stable, like rock solid Wi-Fi on CircuitPython, and I haven't tried it with this. And I think it's going to have to be the Adafruit Airlift. I think is what it's going to have to be. And I'm not going to talk bad about another maker, but there's another board that I tried and just,
Doesn't
it would lock
work.
up.
But you could always pair it to a ESP32 or one of the lower revisions. It doesn't use as much power. That's got Wi-Fi built onto it.
Yeah.
What do you want to use the Wi-Fi for?
I want to make a Wi-Fi one of these. I want to make a Wi-Fi controller. That's what I want. This one's LoRa. I want to make a Wi-Fi one.
Well, I guess you could just use the Wi-Fi Featherwing, the ESP32 version, and not use the new 2040.
Yeah. Sometimes what it is I have an idea like that, and it's gotta stew, right? And then somebody's like, and what happens is Adafruit's always coming out with like new crazy boards and stuff, and then something
It's like every month there's something cool.
Yeah, and so then it'll be like, oh, that's it. Like frankly, the widget was originally going to have for LED indicators one of these, one of the little RGB USB ones. That's originally what I was going to put on it. And then what I realized was, well, if I put a clear top on it, I can see all the LEDs, and I don't need to make any other LEDs. So.
And you mentioned you ordered this to be cut. So how you design, how you ensure like the fitting, like because if I made it, I normally get it up by like a little bit and then print again. So how you get all that?
Yeah, super easy. You have a 3D printer, right?
Yeah,
Just
it's working
3D
right
print
now.
The part. 3D print the panel. That's what I do. I 3D. I probably threw it away, but I 3D printed this same panel. I just leave a big rectangle in the middle because I don't care what the middle looks like. But I just do enough to make sure all my hole placements are right. I do the full assembly, and then that's it. That's what I do. Like, because I used to get stuff so wrong all the time on laser cut stuff. And so now if it's something really big, like on the Cyberdeck, it's actually bigger than my printer could print. So I had this weird, ugly monstrosity where I printed it in pieces and then had blocks sticking up where I screwed it together to make it all kind of fit, and then made sure it dropped in. And so that takes a day and then that saves me, because then I basically can go and order the part. And I use Ponoko, Ponoko.
I will put the link, I guess.
Yeah, they're good. I used to do stuff with Big Blue Saw, and they're pretty good for like thicker metals and stuff like that. But Ponoko will do a bunch of different thicknesses, and it's slowly forcing me to learn Adobe Illustrator. So I don't know Adobe Illustrator very well, but Ponoko really likes. They'll take SVGs, but SVGs sometimes have weird random noise in them. So, and I found that with my crazy designs, sometimes exporting an SVG from Tinkercad has weird random stuff in it that I can't reproduce.
Yeah, I've had similar issues, or the SVG will just it'll just kind of round off a corner.
Yeah.
You know, it'll just like, it tries to simplify it or have, you know, fewer fewer points along the curve, and you end up with these odd shapes.
Yeah. So I mean, in theory, I should be able to do it all in Illustrator. Like, you know, you look at somebody, and I'll use Jimmy DiResta as an example. I had a chance to go to a couple of his workshops in the past, and you watch him use Illustrator, and he's not fancy about it. He knows Illustrator. Don't get me wrong, but to him, that's a tool like a bandsaw is a tool, or his laser cutter is, all of his different machines, and he just knows Illustrator. And those people, like, they start with Illustrator, and I use Illustrator more as like a finishing, like a tool to double check, like, okay, is there any stuff in here, is it working right? So
I'm actually printing it. I'm trying to fit for this little USB port, and then I want it to fit very neatly. So I'm printing just a tiny part of that, but then in Fusion, then obviously the rest of the deck goes around it. But then I keep printing a little piece until that's getting there.
That's the best way to do it, really.
Yeah.
A lot of times I'll just take one slice of the entire deck that I'm working on, and just print that one little piece so I can set everything in it and make sure it looks the way I imagined it, before I go wasting the material and the time to print the whole thing.
And so once the STL looks good, you're able to do with Adobe, send it to the guy to cut the acrylic, and he does it just the same. That's great.
Yeah. I think I want to do more stuff that's I'd like to do more stuff with metal. I think I haven't done a metal encased kit, like or project. I think I would like to at some point, but I've got to come up with some way that I think I'm happy with, because I know there's some stuff that would look cool, kind of like the mill plastic kit, where it's a bunch of sandwiched parts on, but it would be ridiculously expensive to order all those parts, even though it would just be the same part repeating, so it would be not as expensive.
Well, it won't cost you anything. You buy yourself a CNC mill, and then you can cut out all the parts.
Yeah. The challenge, the thing I actually like about sending some stuff out is that once that's done, I can go focus on kind of the other things and kind of pick my battles. But I do find myself increasingly tempted by getting some kind of a laser cutter, and it's just not going to work anytime soon, but maybe at some point. Because
the diode cutters are limited to dark materials, and you can't cut metal because that's a reflective, so it's a bright material. But work within the limitation. Black acrylic looks awesome. Looks great on projects, and that's what I got mine for. It's gonna pretty much exclusively be doing the black acrylic and then some etching. These are aluminum knobs with I don't know if it's really anodized or just painted, but these will etch very, very nicely. And those diode lasers are, very cheap and pretty tiny too. I've got mine just sitting here on the side at the moment. Yeah, I mean, might as well. Why not, right?
Yeah, I'm kind of, what happens is I gotta get, there's a lot of work that goes up right until the end of making any project. And so what happens is afterwards I kind of, let things wander a little bit. And that's the time when I really go out and see what other people are doing. Because when I'm making something, I don't like to look at anybody else's stuff. I like to just kind of try to keep that vision for what I want to do, try to keep it in my head, and even to the point where I don't even like talking about stuff a ton and describing it, because I just want to get it done. I want to push and get it done. So now I'm kind of between things. I've got another project here, and I just need to write, and I've been stewing on it. I think I'm going to do something a little bit different. The article, I'll release it's only got one file. Actually, I'm sorry, it's got two. It's got a 3D printed part and a laser cut part. But then it's all going to be, instead of a how-to article that talks about what you could use it for, I'm gonna do a fiction article. So I'm gonna actually do
Nice.
describe it all, and then at the end of the article, I'm gonna have the photos that show the actual thing. And so I'm just trying to explore kind of new ways to tell a story, rather than, oh look, here's another Pelican case, oh look, here's another a clamshell design, or here's another this or that. I'm trying to go in very unusual directions. Like, this is a commercial product. Am I going to sell any? I have no idea. Am I going to retire off it? Absolutely not. But it's something I wanted to say, like, could I do it? What would it look like? What would it be? So, but after this one that's basically already done, I don't know what's next. So I've got this 2040. I'm going to play with this 2040 a little bit, see what all the noise is on the platform. With the
It's a new Arduino. There's a new one every 6 months.
Yeah, I've heard some stuff that this has got, like it's got some general purpose I/O as well on here, right? So.
Yeah, but so does the regular feather. That's why you can. It's just then you basically have a LoRa for the 2040, a LoRa for the feather, a LoRa for the Arduino.
Yeah, it's a good opportunity to re-release all the same hats you already sold in slightly different format.
I feel it's like that.
I mean, the Arduino Zero, that has a ton of GPIO on it. Real GPIO that can actually be different functions. And that's the same for this little Zio board. It's got 14 GPIO, and every single pin on here, except for one, can be reassigned to be the function of any of the pins that it has. I don't know why one of them is restricted, but for some reason it's limited in what it can do. But it's a fun little board. I mean, they're not cheap either. It's $6 for this thing, and they only come in 3-packs, which is a very annoying thing, because it's hard to get an even number of these things. Like for this particular project, I wanted to get 10 of them, so I'm gonna get 12 of them.
Yeah.
This thing came out just right. Splash.
Nice.
Looks good.
Very nice.
And then there's the little screw there. It kind of fits in there well.
And that's one of those, you were talking about those panel mount connectors you got. Those are for boats usually, right? Those are the waterproof ones?
This one is metal, so I think that one may be for like a car mod. There were some that had a lot more plastic that I think were more waterproof and silicone.
Mm-hmm.
This one, I just felt it looked. It has a nice.
The largest
metal.
USB port ever.
That is a little annoying because that's what's limiting the MSG having taller keycaps. I have to use DSA profiles or short profiles, and part of it is because this guy is so fat that it cannot. It basically limits the space under the keyboard that you'll have. So yeah, keeping this guy there limits the keycap I can use. but I like it, so it'll stay.
Yeah, I hear you. I'm totally guilty of. I like this one part. I'm pretty sure the recovery kit, the Raspberry Pi recovery kit, was built around those mil-spec connectors, and I made like custom cables for them and everything. Never used them. So.
Yeah, I have a lot of those aviator connectors, and I'm still trying to justify using them in a design because, it means whatever you plug in also needs, the matching aviator connector, which means custom USB cables, and they take up a lot of space. That 16 millimeter. They do make a miniature aviator connector that's like 12 millimeter, but it's super limited in the pins you can get for it. The pin count.
Yep.
Could you just have some thinner pins and have the smaller aviator connector?
I think part of the aesthetic though is that it is a little chunky. I think that's kind of looks cool.
So MSG, this is the Raspberry Pi field unit, and this one's got like the USB, the threaded.
Do you even have an HDMI in there, or?
Oh, no. This is like, this tells you, hey, do those USB ports look straight to you? But this is one where this is, cutting holes in a Pelican case is expensive, and I didn't practice on other things. And so I had one where I drilled into it and then the hole placement was off. I mismeasured something. And so I ruined a $50 Pelican case. And I was like, well, I'm going to throw it out. And then I was like, wait, I could just keep drilling holes in it and practice for another one. And by the time I threw it out, it was filled with holes. And by the way, these plastic caps are super easy to cross thread. Now I know why I didn't ever take them off. But this is, I think, the first thing I ever got laser cut as the screen on this. So you can see. And this one, I don't think I've ever shown the inside of this one. Let's see if it, I can't really take it out because it's wired into all of those connectors. But it's a rat's nest in there. It's an absolute rat's nest. But I don't know why keep this. I mean, it's not like it's worth anything to anybody but me.
Yeah, there is this part of the MSG that it is like a little scary, which is the right. That is where the magic happens. That's the KVM switch. And if you look here, there is also a retrocution, a USB hub. That actually takes you one USB into four. That's a 4 USB hub. I'm using 2, but that's basically the KVM that then you're able to run a mouse that will go between the Windows and the Linux, a USB-C keyboard, which is the playing, the HDMI for the screen, the touch and power for the screen, all that. And here is the cable and then the button itself, I make it an extension. So basically from the front, you can push it. Obviously, when all that is inside, it kind of works pretty smooth. But right, I mean, and that's probably fire.
Well, that's how, that's why you end up using custom PCBs. It's good for prototyping, and the rat's nest is fine. We all have them in our projects, but that's why it's nice to be able to make your own custom board and do away with half that wiring. But that comes later. That comes when you're on to like version 5 of something.
Yeah. I see people in the comments are also saying that the Harbor Freight cases are cheaper.
They're also terrible and not waterproof at all.
I would rather be known as the nerd that uses Pelican cases rather than the nerd that uses Harbor Freight cases. But that said, I do have some stuff from Harbor Freight, and some of it has not broken. So
I've broken everything I got from Harbor Freight, but admittedly, it's usually like it fell off a ladder that was up 20 feet or something.
Oh yeah. I'm just having fun. You know they say, why there's so many Harbor Freight stores, right? It's because they keep breaking. Uh-oh, what do you got there, Blasto?
Harbor Freight pliers.
That don't line up.
They don't line up at all.
You just need to put them in a vise and bend them back the other way.
They were worse. This is after I've fixed it with the vise a little bit.
You need to use a persuader, 5-pound persuader.
I used to use the ones that came with the Prusa, and the only damage they have so far is the dog. Is the dog chewing them every time? That's the only damage they've gotten. Other than that, they do all right.
Since we're talking about cases, I got an interesting one here. It actually just got delivered not long ago. And someone in the Discord group was talking about this one. That probably woke everybody up. It's kind of a cool little box. It's one of these project boxes, so instead of it being 3D printed, ABS.
Does that say C-Tech Astronomy on the outside of it?
There's no writing on it anywhere.
That looks like the one from the movie Sneakers.
I mean, it has a feel of the Ready 100.
It could be. This is a knockoff of a Hammond case that they've been making for like 60 years. This is not the real thing. This is a very cheap knockoff, and it really is only like $20, whereas the real Hammond case is like 80.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
it's actually quite nice, and it's a pretty good size too. Aluminum plate for the top, so you could just drill that, put your switches and stuff on it. I'll be 3D printing a plate for this, and got the back plate, same thing. You could drill it, put your connectors. I'll print a plate for it for whatever. I don't even know what I'll use it for yet, but I just kind of wanted to check it out. It's about 9 by 8 inches, maybe about around 3.5 thick.
it's a healthy space in there.
It's definitely bigger than any of the cases I ever allow myself when I'm working on something. Somewhere around here I've got, let's see. This is something that I've been working on, tinkering with, getting a little bit farther. This is for the LCD goes in here, finish the hinges, which actually all fit on the first try.
I love that ribbed look that you have on it, those fins or whatever. That's a cool look.
Mm-hmm.
I saw it on your other thing you were showing too. That's a good.
I try to do it when I can. It's kind of all the 80s stuff had it. It's even functional. It adds a lot of rigidity to the sides because when you print those things, the printer fills them in, so it ends up being solid plastic instead of having space in it. And it's a nice grip surface. They're on here as well. So, when you're holding something, having slick sides and sweaty hands, like you're just going to drop your shit all the time. This is, everyone's seen this on camera a few times now, but a 50% keyboard with very, very tight spacing. You do have to use custom keycaps on it. It won't fit standard. But one of the reasons I got this case was when I saw the dimensions of it, I was like, my keyboard could probably fit in there. And it does, and might even be enough space. Well, no, not quite. But I could also add another couple columns or rows to it, fit even more in here.
Is that a joystick pointer? Those are cool.
A what?
A joystick pointer for the mouse?
I do not have one.
It's got
You
this
could have one. You can make one.
typewriter feel.
Yeah, that would be
Look at
pretty
that.
cool.
Look at the color on that typewriter, man. Look at that blue gray. That's what it's coming across here.
Yeah.
Hey, just send me
And
the keycaps.
MSG, you were asking about this screen too.
Like,
It's a perfect fit. Oh, I was hoping it would
that is
fit.
perfect.
I was hoping it would fit. Wow, it's only going to leave a couple millimeters around the edges, but it does actually fit on there.
I just put an order on the WaveShare side, and I immediately regret it. Up until now, I always bought WaveShare on on Amazon, so it comes in 2 days and you're done. I'm like, well, I'm gonna support them a little, put order on the website, you know that they'll make 15-20% more. So
and they sell a bunch that they don't have on Amazon too.
Yeah, that was fine. And the things at first are like $15 less each, but obviously then they cook $60 of shipping, so kind of same price as Amazon at the end. But then now it's been a couple days, it's just still prepared for shipping. They say, yeah, we're gonna ship from China, it'll be 7 to 10 days, and it's like I just paid $60 shipping, and it's gonna take 2 weeks. Immediately regretted it, but it includes that screen, and I do hope to. I'm thinking make so we around here the gherkin and make a 30% with that screen. When I look the size, I think it's about the same size of the gherkin. When I was looking, the 7.9, so I feel
here, hold it up to the screen. We can see if it. Yeah. See, it's the same size.
Yeah, let's move a little.
It's like the same ratio.
Just put the screen on the back. Just make it completely impossible ergonomics.
You know,
you
could have the screen slide out from underneath of it. I haven't. So this thing here for the screen, might as well grab the screen if I knew. It's somewhere over there. Here we go. This is the WaveShare display, 5-inch, pretty nice little thing. It's kind of like a cell phone screen.
Oh, that's the AMOLED?
Yeah.
So small.
I'm actually not going to use this case with these hinges because I decided that instead I'm going to have the like this under the keyboard, and it'll then swivel out and then hinge up.
Oh, wasn't there a T-Mobile phone that was at the Sidekick or something that had that where the phone would?
I don't know.
Do that?
The reason I want to do that is when it's kind of set up like this, it's not too thick, and the keyboard's exposed. I'll be able to use it as just a standalone keyboard. And you won't even know that it's a whole computer that has the screen. It'll just look like a mechanical keyboard. This case isn't much thicker than a typical mechanical keyboard. So you'll just have this little slip out thing, hinge up. I already designed the hinge for it, and it'll work with pretty minimal effort.
Isn't the PyKeep or someone doing that?
The PyKeep has a keyboard that slides out and then kind of comes up and hinges and clicks into place. Yeah. Doing the rails to slide it, it's kind of difficult because you end up having the case plus an internal case for the screen that slides out. This way, when you flip it over and hinge it up, the whole thing gets half as thick. You're reducing the size. So when it's hinged up, the whole thing will look kind of thin and hopefully kind of sleek. And then folded back up, it'll be a little thicker, but still no worse than, like, here's my 60% side by side. They're the same, but this will have a whole computer in it. And that's what this Pi 4, the Pi 4 here that's stripped down. That's the one that's going to end up in here because I can't really fit anything else. 10,000 milliamp battery fits pretty well too. So yeah, it's a fun little project. But those WaveShare displays, they're pretty good. I really want to try and get a hold of them and give them a couple pointers on some things that they completely suck at. Like those standoffs that they solder to the board. You can't remove them, and you don't really need them all the time or want them. Or for this display, wherever I just put it back down, how about having standoffs in the corners? There's one here, then here, then up there, and over here, and trying to measure these things out was such a pain in the ass. It'd be much nicer if it was just a even spacing between them and they could give you those measurements off the website instead of this random placement. Like, I don't know who they thought would ever actually integrate this into a case with that kind of odd placement.
The Pimeroni 10-inch, not the 10-inch because it doesn't have any tabs, but the I think it's the bigger one or the 7-inch. There's one of them that I used on the mill plastic one, and it's got all of them are they're not square. They're all off on just weird different axes and all the different.
It's like they just stuck it wherever they could.
And I understand that, but that's when a mechanical diagram makes all the difference, right? To say, okay, here's where it is. Because what I had to do was measure best I could, and it was a screen, so I had to be very careful not to scratch it or anything like that. And it was just okay. And then I'd print out something with screw holes, and then I'd put the screen on it. Oh, I've got to move this one over. I've got to move this one down. I've got to, and do all of that. And even that still is not a mechanical diagram, right? It's still not something that other people are going to be able to use.
Yeah, all of my screw placement for this one, they're all still off a couple millimeters. It was close, but not quite.
Yeah,
that's the thing that bothered me with those is that the placement of the buttons here, the screen and the keyboard, is not consistent across PCBs. Like this one has some things that are moved 1 millimeter off from that one. Those are two different STLs.
Probably hand soldered boards then.
I uploaded the STL, but I put on my side, like if you use it, you probably will need to tweak it a little because these two are actually different. That is the.
I wonder if it was a revision or just poorly soldered.
I mean, I bought them. I think I bought them both from the same place. But the bottom of the keyboard, it's actually 1 millimeter difference. I don't know if you can appreciate here, if you're able to hold them. But yeah, and those buttons here are also aligned different. As a matter of fact, the screen here, this one, I believe, this one maybe, I don't even know which one I'm pointing. That side is thicker on one than on the other. And I made all these little adjustments in Fusion, create 2 STL files and print it. But it's even worse, let's say, than the wave share that has the places all over the place. But at least so far, when I got one wave share to work, I'm able to put other 7-inch wave shares and they kind of all fit. In some cases like that one, like you will get a new wave share and it will be like, move 1 millimeter here, 1 millimeter there, and it's that more annoying.
Yeah, I've ran into that a couple times with the 7-inch displays. They'll have the top glass for the touchscreen will be just slightly off, or the whole design will be off just a millimeter or two. So I've learned to give a little extra space around the screens.
So getting back to this, like putting the screw holes and getting the measurements for that, Ben Heck had a pretty cool video on his YouTube channel where he takes like a regular flatbed scanner and he'll put the thing on there like in the center of the scanner so it's the most accurate, and then he'll make an SVG out of that and then print it either using his laser cutter on regular paper or his regular printer just to test the placement and then bring that into Fusion.
Oh, that's
I thought that was pretty cool.
That is, I'm like Ben Heck, I'm like, yeah, it's going to do this thing that nobody else really has access to. And then you're like, oh, I use a scanner. And then brought it in. That's genius because that saves so much time in like contouring. The way I do it is I do tons and tons of test prints right now. And that's why if you look, I'll use a display or I'll use something and I kind of like to stick to it because I'm like lazy. Like I don't want to go and remap all of those. I mean, even if you look at the Raspberry Pi 7-inch display, the screws aren't symmetrical on the back. They're offset to one side by like a couple millimeters. So again, it's like if makers made the points on the corner, if they mounted them like either in the center, on the corners, or something like that, and made them symmetrical, like that'd be enough. You know what I mean? So, but, yeah.
So we're coming up on the 2-hour mark here, which is our cutoff on this show. Does anyone have anything they want to share before we wrap up the stream?
Okay, just congratulate back here on his widget, and hopefully goes well. And looks pretty good.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe
Tomorrow
someone
I
out on the
should be-
corner.
I should be going back to working on this tomorrow on Twitch again.
The Game Boy upgrades.
Yeah.
I will be watching. That's good stuff,
Oh.
Blasto. It really is.
Glad you like it, because I really don't know what I'm doing. But
Well, it's working.
yeah, more or less. I found the battery board that I thought was broken. I just needed to actually have the battery in it for it to work. You couldn't just plug it into USB power on its own. So,
Yeah, that's always
Yeah.
good. You gotta have the battery in the thing.
yeah.
Cool. So Blasto, you're streaming tomorrow, and
Mhm.
we'll be back on Saturday as well. Not quite sure who will be joining us at the moment, but I'm sure it'll be fun. And for everyone out there watching, please do subscribe. I can see that only about 5% of the people that watch subscribe to the channel. So I don't know why you would be watching this if you don't want to, be part of the group. This isn't exactly riveting stuff for outsiders. So do more than just subscribe. Come join the Discord if you're not in there already. That's where all the fun is, and everything we're talking about here, we're talking about there all week too. And hundreds more projects that are going right now. Literally hundreds of them going in the Discord right now. So yeah, thanks everyone for joining me, and we'll be back in a couple of days. Good night.
All right. Bye all.
Bye.